Check this out. I just Google searched this. The Unborn Victims of Violence Act.
Yes.
Is a United States law that recognizes an embryo or fetus in utero as a legal victim if they are injured or killed during the commission of any of over 60 listed federal crimes of violence. Yep. The law defines child in utero as a member of the species of Homo sapiens at any stage of development. The law is codified in two sections of U.S. Code. Blah, blah, blah. The law applies only to certain offenses over which the U.S. government has jurisdiction, including certain crimes committed on federal properties, against certain federal officials and employees, and by members of the military. In addition, it covers certain crimes that are defined by statute as federal offenses wherever they occur. So, look, to put it simply, if you kill an unborn baby, since 2004, it has been considered a crime, and the embryo is a legal victim.
A person, too, according to what you were saying there.
Right.
What's the name of that again?
The Unborn Victims of Violence Act.
Yeah, that was the Bush administration and the GOP Congress's kind of foot in the door of normalizing the idea of, like, you know, this is an unborn child. It's also a victim for future reference as, you know, and this is also why abortion should be banned or restricted or whatever.
So this was Bush's way of signaling that the unborn fetus is a person.
Not just signaling, but actually creating the legal mechanism to build upon in the future. The camel's nose under the tent, and you know, a few years later, you got a full camel in your tent. The purpose behind that, as Tim noted, that's for federal offenses or for federal personnel, like military personnel or whatever. So like if it's outside of federal jurisdiction, that doesn't apply. So the whole purpose of that, even though it's very limited when it could ever be used, the whole purpose of that, yes, was to signal to the base, but also to create that infrastructure or that legal mechanism to make future build-upons in the future.
Well, this would mean that in Washington, D.C., for instance, if you committed one of these listed crimes against a pregnant woman resulting in the death of the fetus, then you're
charged with this. Yeah, exactly.
But I guess what is the charge? Is it feticide? Is it homicide? Is it murder, manslaughter? How do they handle it?
That I don't know.
I guess if it's a legal victim and considered a person, it would just be homicide.
Or whatever they did to it, like basically whatever you did to the fetus,
right? They call it murder.
Had you done it to a post-born person, whatever, it's the same crime.
It's murder. The title of the bill is an act to amend Title 18 U.S. Code and the Uniform Code of Military Justice to protect unborn children from assault and murder and for other purposes. So quite literally, they refer to it as murder.
Yeah, if it was killed, it would be murder or manslaughter or whatever.
Abortion's not part of this. It's an exception as abortion. But I could imagine this argument happening where they're like, well, abortion should be considered part of the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. So we got to be real careful that they don't start interweaving these without people understanding what's happening. Because if a mother goes in for an abortion and then gets charged with murder because of some stupid law, that's going to just unravel the fabric of society. We've got to not start punishing women for...
This is, I believe, a gray area right now because the Roe v. Wade decision, they decided, they sidestepped the question of, is this a Ninth Amendment issue where abortion is an unenumerated right, or is it a 10th Amendment issue where this was never covered under the Constitution and therefore it should be left to the states or the people? Instead, they sidestepped and said, well, it's a question of privacy. It's a violation of privacy. Right. And so in overturning this, the current Supreme Court said not only it's not a privacy issue, they said it's also not a Ninth Amendment issue, but they said it's a 10th Amendment issue, meaning it should be left to the states. Correct. So at least as it was decided, it did not sound like they had an appetite for a federal ban on abortion.
The fascinating thing to me in all of this, there was a tweet from a personality I saw on Twitter who was wondering why. He said something like, name any medical procedure where you have no right to privacy. Why isn't this a thing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, did you read Roe? Because I don't think any of these people actually know what the point of Roe was or the decision, one of which was stated by the Supreme Court. The fetus itself is a living being with a right to privacy. Therefore, the question of an abortion is not about a single person, but about two persons, which is why we ended up with the trimester ruling. Was like, basically they said, okay, in the first trimester, you can get an abortion, but afterwards, now you have to consider the person's life, which is the baby. And then with Casey, they said it's viability, it's not trimester.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these people realize that. They keep saying things like my body, my choice, and you're like, read Roe. They're specifically saying at a certain point you have to recognize there are two bodies here.
Yeah.
They don't even recognize that. In the federal law, they actually have a photo here on the Wikipedia page of a woman named Tracy Marciniak holding the body of her son. She was seriously injured in an assault during the ninth month of her pregnancy. So that's what I often say. Like, I don't understand why there is a legal distinction between two babies of the exact same amount of time since conception, but one has been removed from the womb and one hasn't. Why is there a legal protection for one but not the other? I don't understand any logical or moral statement.
Mostly because the woman still has the protection. The protection's like deferred to the mother if the baby's in the womb.
But that still doesn't fly. Like, if a mother was shielding her baby from your assault and you ended up hurting her hands and killing the baby, you still committed homicide against the baby.
If a pregnant woman goes and kills someone, you don't charge the baby with accomplice to murder.
No,
but it's a second person that was there, and going through all the motions with them.
What?
Like, it's an argument that the baby's not not able.
Wait, I'm not following.
The baby's not able to make choices at that stage, so you can't treat it like it.
But why would you? Like, kidnapping someone while you commit crimes, we don't say that the kidnapped victim is responsible for the crime.
Yeah, so
bringing your child to a bank robbery, we don't hold the child responsible for you bringing him there.
Occupying the same physical space.
There's two parallel debates here. One is the personhood debate. When does this cease to be a clump of cells, and when does it become a full-fledged person that has the same legal and moral and ethical protections that anyone else would have? A secondary debate is, even if it has personhood at some point before birth, which I think it's hard to argue that there's some magic moment passing through the womb, like, oh, now it's magically a person. But the secondary debate there becomes, at what point, if ever, does one human life have the right to the connection to another human life for its subsistence? And so that has been an argument that, the mother, and that's why it comes down to what the mother wanted or intended or decided, is the idea, well, that the mother shouldn't have to be, should the mother have to be, tied to and be providing, subsistence to and risking, her life and health for a second person, even if it is an actual, recognized person. Does that go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, this is where it gets interesting, because if you look at polling across the board over the past several decades, most people, you'll see the left will be like, 80% of people are pro-choice. And I'm like, yeah, but they also really resent and reject elective abortion. Because the average person, when you're asking them about abortion, they think, they imagine this woman who's crying and being like, I have no choice. I need to make the right decision for my life and my family, and I wish it wasn't this way. But instead, you have like 93% of abortions are elective, no reason given. Many women use it as a form of contraception. Most people don't like that. So when you look at, I actually went through tons of data.
Yeah.
All these different polls, all these different institutions, because I'm like, okay, they're saying, I can't believe that most people in this country are just like totally fine with abortion as contraception. And people keep saying they do. And it's like, when you actually look at the questions asked, you realize, actually, they're not okay with elective abortion. And they're very much in line with, I think, how Oklahoma's been handling it, meaning abortion is legal in any legitimate circumstance. And legitimate being a very, very narrow band of acceptable causes for why abortion can happen. Yeah. And most people, I think it's more than 2/3, around 70, say abortion should only happen with a legitimate reason. Yeah. And I'm like, that's actually very restrictive. That would get rid of 93% of abortions. You're not hearing that when it comes to what the left is actually arguing when they're talking about this. So I bring that up because you mentioned the woman is providing her body to the child. And this is an important distinction. In the issue of rape and incest, I think you have a very, very difficult position. But in this instance especially, I think women have a right to abortion, particularly because if you're going to make the argument that women made irresponsible choices and then got pregnant.
Rape's not an irresponsible choice. You were
right. It's victimhood.
Yeah.
And so here's the challenge, because I've argued with this with Seamus. If a woman says, I'm going to go party tonight, I don't need protection, and then gets pregnant, then someone makes the point, the government can't mandate she provide her body to another being. It's like, well, hold on. She made the choice to provide her body to that being now wants to rescind it. It's not that she made the choice specifically thinking it would happen, but she engaged in the behavior which results in that it happened, and now there's a being dependent upon her. So it's like, if you agree to a medical procedure that would provide a direct link to another person's blood, and then after 2 weeks said, I want to shut this down, they'd be like, well, now you'd be killing the person.
Yep.
It's a different story as opposed to someone forcefully jammed, you fused your body with someone else, human centipede style.
Right.
Then I'd be like, you had no right to do that, and you can't hold it against them.
But the incest thing isn't victimhood either. Incest is a consensual.
I disagree.
Well, there could be rape involved in an incest situation, but if a brother and a sister decide to have a baby together, I don't understand how that would be different than having like a child with some sort of deformity in the womb.
I do understand your point, and I think there is an important moral distinction to be made that individuals can choose to engage in that behavior. But I also think incest has a special space in that it results in serious problems.
It can in inbreeding, they would call it.
Yeah.
But like so can like
that's why it's illegal. Just actually,
Yeah.
But so can any kind of deform. Like if you find out at 3 weeks or 7 weeks that the child has like a brain deformity or something, then it's basically like a incest gone wrong.
Right, but also, I mean, when they say, the reason they say rape and incest is very often incest is rape. It is rape within the family. Like the power dynamics alone of, a father having sex with and impregnating a daughter, that's rape. Like, I mean, there's, that's not, it would be very hard to argue, especially if you got a very young daughter or something like that.
Statutory rape.
Yeah. And not just statutory, but also from the standpoint of like, this is a child, like it's pedophilia or hebephilia or whatever you want to call it. So it is also an act of sexual assault or rape, in addition to the fact that they're related.
That's because the child can't consent. The idea is legally a child until they're 18 cannot consent, so it's a form of rape. But if they call it statutory, it's not actual.
You're making the distinction of like two consenting adult cousins,
two consenting adult siblings that get pregnant. Should they just be able to go get the baby aborted at 5 months?
I mean, it's a good point because we certainly are not okay with the idea of eugenics-based abortion, where it's like, I don't like the baby I'm told the baby will not be well, therefore get rid of it. Because if the incest is the same argument, then.
Yeah,
but I want to point something out because I saw a meme, and it's the two arms coming together with like two distinct ideas and then coming together over one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah,
and it said slavery and abortion, and then together it said denying personhood rights. And I was like, that's really funny because it's Democrats that are denying personhood today. And then I was gonna make a joke. I was like, you know who else denied personhood rights? And I was gonna put the Confederates, and then I was like, wait, those were the Democrats too.
Yeah, those.
It's literally just the Democrats.
Yeah. I want to tell you. I mean, I don't know how much longer you wanted to talk about this, so I do want to get this in. I actually personally consider myself pro-life. I think that abortions are more often than not gruesome and regrettable things. The reason that I really do not like the idea of government getting involved in this is because if you look at how government handles things, they never just handle this. They, by their very nature, there's mission creep, and they just keep getting more and more and more involved. If they take the turn of saying, this is a constitutionally protected person inside of your body, and we have to make sure this person is not killed, that doesn't end there. It is also, we need to make sure you're taking care of this person. And if we're making sure you're taking care of this person, we need to make sure that you're getting regular inspections. And if there's a miscarriage, we're going to have to investigate that. And you know what? You're going to need to be taking, keep your vitamin levels at a certain level and keep your BMI below a certain level. This inevitably, if you look at the history of how government ends up regulating things, this will inevitably at some point, especially once the progressives decide that they've lost this battle and they're just going to fight it on the other side, it will lead to pregnancy licensing. If that sounds insane, by the way, for anyone who thinks that sounds insane, go back 100 years and tell someone all the things they have to have a license to do right now. And now go forward 10, 20 years and tell someone that you could have an unlicensed pregnancy and look at the look of horror on their face. And whenever something has to be licensed or regulated, here come the rent-seeking crony lobbyists who want to make sure that their prenatal vitamin is mandated. So now what used to be $8 a month is now $500 a month. And who knows if your insurance is going to cover it. And you're going to end up inevitably in a situation, because illegal abortions will always be available, there will always be a black market for it, where poor women who are unable to afford a legal, regulated pregnancy end up getting an illegal abortion, who would have otherwise kept the child because they can't afford the burden of getting a legal pregnancy, and it's way easier to hide an illegal abortion than an illegal pregnancy.
I think that's a ridiculous notion that anyone's miscarriage would be investigated in the circumstance that, abortion would be federally banned or...
But then anyone could just say they miscarried instead of had an abortion.
Well, Roe v. Wade was the start of the government encroaching upon women's bodies. Like, that's the...
What do you mean by that?
That's the new precedent they shouldn't have gotten involved in the first place.
Well, the involvement was saying whether or not they could do it.
That was the beginning of their regulating pregnancy and.
So just read that one. U.S. women are being jailed for having miscarriages. Now, it could be wrong.
Story. Yeah, I want to hear the full story.
It could be wrong, right?
Yeah.
They say a 21-year-old Native American woman from Oklahoma was convicted of manslaughter after having a miscarriage. People were outraged, but she was not alone. They say she was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the first-degree manslaughter of her unborn son.
Was she doing drugs?
Maybe.
That's what I've seen a couple cases like this, and I was like, "What the heck?"
The
is
examiner
this
did
story?
not determine the cause of death, noting genetic anomaly, placenta abruption, or maternal methamphetamine use could have been contributing factors. So it was the drug use.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it led to an investigation. And the problem is, if you've criminalized abortion, then the easy loophole, if they're not actively investigating miscarriages, is to just say, oopsie, got a miscarriage, right? And so that can trigger. I mean, it's not like every single time they're going to, have someone and they're going to be drilling them and putting the lights on them and all of that. But at the very least, there has to be some follow-up by law enforcement to make sure this was a legitimate miscarriage. And now imagine being a woman who's just had a miscarriage.
I don't think that
They
that
have
is
to.
inevitable.
But they would
Do you
have
think
to.
that before 1973, every woman who had a miscarriage was getting investigated?
No, actually,
it?
before 1973 and really before the restrictions that started a few decades prior, abortion was actually something that was largely unregulated in the U.S. So it wasn't really coming into the late 19th and early 20th century was actually when you saw the ban starting. I will tell you, I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion, because otherwise, if that's not the case, then really there is no effective ban on abortion. They can just all say they miscarried.
The reason you might have seen bans on abortion starting in the early 20th century is that's when contraception was taking off. But that's a whole other.
Oh yeah. No, I mean,
discussion.
there were reasons for that, but and the only point I'm making is that we haven't seen this exist long enough to see the logical conclusion of what happens when government gets their hooks into something.
Government tends to screw things up.
That's what concerns me about the Roe v. Wade overturn is that now instead of one government involved in the regulation, there's 50 governments regulating it.
I don't know, but that's kind of a good thing.
I don't know, man.
Because
I don't want the governments involved.
Decentralization is better than centralization.
In general, it
Sometimes.
is. I mean, if you argue, decentralization should go to the individual, right? Ideally. So if you're arguing that this is a women's rights thing, then the obvious argument is that it goes back to the individual. If you're arguing that there should be some regulation of this, then the argument would be that it should be handled at the state level. I'm kind of transcending all of that and saying I really just, the idea of government getting involved in something like this, the war on drugs, more drugs, empowering of cartels, the criminalization of otherwise peaceful human behavior, the militarization of the police, no-knock raids, all of this came from trying to regulate the use of a substance. And if you get them now involved in pregnancy, then I'm very concerned where that's going to lead. Not immediately, but years, decades down the road, what that leads to. Especially once progressives say, hey, you know what, screw it, we'll just regulate the hell out of it then.
I hear you on government involvement. The way I have to describe it is that people recognize a problem and say, let's do a government program to fix it.
Yes.
So you have a wound on your arm and you slap a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
A few months later, they say, ooh, that wound is looking festery and stinky.
Yep.
Let's put another Band-Aid on
Yep.
it. And they keep stacking up bandages on a festering gangrenous wound they never solve.
Yep.
But that being said, the problem's cultural.
It is very much cultural.
One of the reasons we didn't have the issue with abortion pre-1973 that we do today, or would, is because of very different culture. Today, it's like, shout your abortion. Abortion at 9 months. You get an abortion and you get an abortion. Lena Dunham coming out saying she wished she had one.
Oof.
Even like
But she didn't.
But she didn't get pregnant. She was saying she wished she just got pregnant so she could have an abortion. She was like, all these women talk about it and I want to talk about it too. And it's like, that's messed up.
That's
It's
a
a complete
take. Wow.
psyop that anyone would think. So I had to say psyop. That anyone is favorable to that. I think most people feel rather lukewarm or have mixed feelings about abortion.
No, not the zombies, dude. Michelle Wolf did a whole bit where she was like, you get an abortion, yay! And they're all cheering for
but
it.
the masses, not the talking heads.
Oh, for sure. Right. Right, I see what you're saying, a psyop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what I was saying. Most people, when you look at the polls, are like, we think abortion should only be allowed with legitimate reasons. And like that eliminates 93% of abortion.
It's a much more nuanced take than either side wants to say. There's not this large plurality that's like, yes, even if you've been raped, you have to carry the child. Nor is this necessarily large plurality that's like, yeah, all the way up to the very moment of birth, we're cool with it. But like you said, it's a cultural issue. It's also an economic issue. Like if you look at the surveys that have been done of women that get abortions, it's largely for economic reasons. A lot of them are already mothers who have just made an economic decision. Well, that's a problem that can be solved in an economic thing. I wish
most of it is no reason given.
Well, but of reasons that are given, economics is
Right.
the main one. And so the point of that is that, I think that I wish that there was more focus put on addressing the concerns and reasons why women get abortions, getting rid of some of these ridiculous restrictions on adoption, which, by the way, pro-lifers agree with. I hate watching pro-choicers or pro-abortion, whatever you want to call them, on Twitter and on Facebook going, well, if these pro-lifers really cared, they'd want to loosen the restrictions on adoption. Well, yeah, pro-lifers actually do want that. Like they definitely want that. They want adoption to be easier. It's
Amy Coney Barrett's got
ridiculous.
2 adopted kids?
Yeah, no, they absolutely want that. So that's a common point that we could all agree on.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.